She stepped over the suitcase like it wasn't even there. Didn't ask where I thought I was going. Didn't cry. Didn't shout. She just looked at the open front door, raised one eyebrow, and went back to stirring almond milk into her coffee. And I stood there like an idiot. Keys in hand, heart in throat, waiting for something. Anything. Really, I finally muttered. She took a sip. Really, that was it. 7 years. Dozens of holidays. A shared mortgage. A golden retriever named Dune. All of it weighed less than the cup in her hand. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some disbelief. Maybe a tear. Maybe for her to drop the mug and say, "Don't go." But she didn't. She turned on a podcast about business leadership and walked upstairs without even checking if the door was still open. That's when I knew she was already gone. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. Marin had left weeks ago. She was just polite enough not to pack. Still, I didn't leave. Not then. Instead, I dragged the suitcase back to the closet and cried like a coward in the laundry room. She knew I'd stay. She counted on it. And the worst part? She was right. Until she made a mistake. One small, arrogant mistake. She brought him to the art fair. He wore my jacket. That's how it started. And how it ended. Well, let's just say she wasn't laughing when I finally opened the door for her. It wasn't even a subtle one. Not the kind you'd confuse. It was my navy Harrington, frayed at the cuffs, stitched on the inside left pocket by Marin herself when the lining tore. A one-of-a-kind, personal jacket. He wore it like it meant nothing. Like he owned it. Like I had somehow vanished and left my life in a neatly folded pile for him to step into. The art fair was her thing, not mine. I hated those events. Overpriced food trucks, ceramic owls, and guys who said mixed media like it was a personality trait. She used to beg me to go. I'd cave every year, carry her bag, smile at artists whose names I couldn't pronounce. But this year, she didn't even mention it. She just left the flyer on the fridge, knowing I wouldn't say a word. I wouldn't have gone. I swear I wouldn't have. But something told me to. A hunch. A flicker. Maybe it was the way she straightened her hair that morning or how she wore that same red scarf again like it had become her lucky charm. Whatever it was, I called in sick, sat in my car 4 blocks from the fairgrounds, and waited like some sad parody of a private detective. And then I saw them. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The angle. The distance. I blinked. Looked again. He had his arm around her waist like it belonged there. She laughed at something he said and tilted her head the way she used to with me. Like he was the most fascinating man on earth. But it wasn't just the laugh. It was the jacket. My jacket. The one she told me smelled like comfort. The one I left in the trunk when we came back from the lake. I forgot about it. She must have found it, taken it out, and what? Gifted it to him. My ears rang. My palms sweated. And still, I sat there, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned bone white. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. Couldn't move. All I could think was, she repurposed me. Piece by piece. She gave away the parts of our life like hand-me-downs. The jacket. The inside jokes. The art fair. That little crooked smile she gave when someone said something stupid, and she wanted to seem polite. He was getting it all. My greatest hits. My softest corners. My everything. I should have walked over. I should have torn that jacket off his back and asked him if he even knew where that stitching came from. If he knew the smell and the collar was mine. If he knew she used to fall asleep on my shoulder on long drives home with that jacket draped over both of us like a blanket. But I didn't. I drove home. Again. When she walked through the door hours later, glowing and exhausted, I pretended to be half asleep on the couch. "Hey, baby," she whispered, brushing crumbs off her coat. I didn't say a word. She went upstairs, showered, got in bed, fell asleep. Meanwhile, I lay there in the dark, wide awake, plotting. Because if she could hand off my life so easily to a stranger, then maybe I could make leaving it just as easy. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't scream. It whispers. It erodes. It rubs against you like sandpaper, slow and deliberate, until one day you look down and realize you're raw and bleeding and don't even know when it started. That was me. Marin didn't shatter my heart in one moment. She dissolved it, molecule by molecule, with every lie she didn't have to say out loud. The next morning, she kissed my forehead like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't paraded my identity across the art fair on another man's shoulders. "You okay?" she asked, brushing my hair back. "You look pale." I nodded. Lied. Said I just hadn't slept. She told me to drink more water. I watched her walk out the door humming something upbeat, while my stomach turned inside out. That week, I tested a theory. I stopped speaking unless she spoke to me first. I stopped asking questions. I stopped offering help. I stopped initiating affection. I wanted to see how long it would take her to notice I was fading from the frame. The answer? For days. And even then, it was only because I didn't wash her favorite mug. "You doing okay?" she finally asked, tilting her head the way she used to when she actually cared. I said I was fine. She shrugged, said she was thinking of spending the weekend at her friend Esme's cabin. I knew Esme was in Portugal. I knew that because Esme posted a boomerang on Instagram with a bottle of sangria and the caption, "Lisbon Dreams." Marin didn't even try to cover her tracks anymore. She assumed I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't care, that I'd just sit on the couch in my sad little uniform of flannel pants and blind loyalty, watching her walk in and out of my life like I was a background character in her rise and shine fantasy. So I played along. I told her to enjoy herself. I smiled like a hostage, packed her overnight bag with the same hands that used to trace her collarbone like it was sacred. She left that Friday at 6:17 p.m. I waited exactly 2 hours before I moved. First, I took down every photo of us from the walls. Then, I opened her side of the closet and counted how many pieces of clothing she hadn't worn in months. I folded her sweaters with precision, with reverence even, and placed them in boxes. Not to throw out. Not yet. Just to see what the room looked like without her. It looked cleaner, quieter, like I could finally hear myself think. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I logged into our shared phone plan portal and checked the location history. She wasn't in any cabin. She was at a downtown hotel. The same hotel we'd stayed at on our second anniversary. Room 419. She must have requested it on purpose. A sick, nostalgic kind of cruelty. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. I could have called. I could have texted. I could have sent her a photo of our old anniversary card that I kept hidden in the drawer beneath the TV remote, the one where she wrote, "I hope we grow old in the same house with creaky floors and tea stains." But I didn't. Instead, I made a new plan. She thought she had all the power, that I'd stay silent, that I was too weak to move. But the thing about being invisible? No one sees you coming when you finally strike. Saturday morning, 9:12 a.m. I was sitting at our kitchen counter, sipping coffee from her favorite mug, the one she complained I hadn't washed earlier that week, when a thought landed so hard I nearly dropped it. What if the hotel room wasn't just for her and him? What if it was for them and others? What if this thing, this affair, wasn't even about love anymore? What if it had rotted into something even more hollow, more reckless? I hated how fast my mind went there. But once the seed was planted, it grew like ivy. I couldn't stop picturing her laughing at dinner, not with one man, but three. Not holding one secret, but many. Layers. Lies inside lies. And all while I was at home, reorganizing the spice rack like a desperate fool, trying to control something in a life that was unraveling behind my back. That afternoon, I drove downtown. I didn't go to the hotel. I parked across the street from the wine bar on 9th, the one we used to go to before we got too tired for Friday nights. It was sentimental. Dumb, maybe. But something told me I'd find answers there. Or at least the courage to stop pretending I didn't need them. Around 5:40 p.m, she walked in. Red scarf. Black boots. The kind of walk that says I don't owe anyone anything. And then, 5 minutes later, he followed. Not Ash this time. Someone new. Younger. Taller. The way she lit up when she saw him, it wasn't a look of guilt. It was pride. As if collecting hearts was her new hobby, and I was the dusty one in the back of the shelf. She reached out, touched his chest, leaned in close to whisper something, and for a split second, I swear I saw her glance toward the window. Not at me. She couldn't have seen me. But something in her face tightened, like a flicker of a memory, like a ghost brushing past. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I just sat there with my hands shaking on the wheel, gripping the steering column like it might keep me from floating away. My vision blurred. I think I bit my tongue to keep from yelling. I wanted to run inside, flip the table, scream my name so loud the glass shook. But what good would it have done? She'd already deleted me. So instead, I drove home. I opened my laptop and started writing something I hadn't touched in years, my journal. I titled the entry, "Obituary for the Man She Forgot." And I poured it all out. Every compromise I made. Every night I stayed up listening for her key in the door. Every time I told myself she's just stressed, or this is just a phase, or you're not enough. Lol, try harder. But something shifted halfway through. My voice changed. It went from passive to precise, from pitiful to calculating. I didn't even notice until I reread the last line I'd typed. She thought I'd beg her to stay. She doesn't know I've already left. I stared at that line for a long time, and then I smiled. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for her to destroy me. I was preparing to let her watch as I disappeared on my own terms. The next morning, I began removing myself in silence. It wasn't dramatic. No packed bags in the hallway. No shouting matches or broken dishes. That's not how I wanted this to go. Marin was a storm, loud and fast and dazzling. But I had become the wind beneath her door, invisible, constant, impossible to stop once I started moving. I began with the little things. I cleared out my books from the bedroom shelf. The ones she never touched, but always liked to align by color because it made the room feel curated. I took the green one she gave me on our second anniversary, Letters to a Young Poet, and stuffed it into a grocery bag with my chargers, socks, and passport. Next, I removed my Spotify account from the speaker. It was petty, maybe, but I couldn't bear the idea of her waking up on Sunday and hearing my coffee morning playlist without me. I wanted silence to greet her. I wanted her to reach for a song and find nothing. I even took the batteries out of the remote and left it face down on the couch. That was for me. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted her to feel a tiny jolt of confusion. Not pain, just enough to wonder if the air had shifted. By mid-afternoon, I had gathered every trace of myself that could be moved without setting off alarms. I left behind the framed photo of us in Banff, the one she liked to show guests. Let her explain that one. I hoped she'd look at it and notice what was wrong. Not the image itself, but the energy, the lie. Then came the part one hadn't planned for. As I walked into the hallway with the last of my things, I heard the key in the door. I froze. It was too early. She wasn't supposed to be back yet. The knob turned. There was no time to hide the bag slung over my shoulder or the look on my face. When the door opened, she stepped in wearing the same red scarf, her hair wind-blown, her cheeks flushed with city air and God knows what else. She saw me. Her smile faltered. "You going somewhere?" she asked casually, brushing hair from her face. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past her, slow, controlled, and stepped onto the welcome mat. I held the door open behind me like a gentleman, but I didn't look back. She didn't move, didn't say a word, didn't even flinch. And that told me everything I needed to know. But just as I stepped off the porch, I heard her voice, soft, unsure, not quite the confident blade she'd wielded for months. "Lowell." I turned halfway, just enough to see her silhouette framed in the doorway. "Is this really happening?" she asked. I shrugged. "You tell me," I said. "You left a long time ago. I'm just catching up." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I left her standing there, barefoot on the hardwood, wrapped in that stupid red scarf that wasn't even warm enough for November. And I swear, just as the door began to swing closed behind me, I saw it. The flicker. Regret. It wasn't big, not yet. But it was there. And that was enough for now. I didn't go far that night. Not physically. I drove 3 miles to a cheap motel that smelled like bleach and last chances, and I sat in the parking lot for a long time before checking in. Room 213. The blinds were crooked. The bed was stiff. But for the first time in months, the air didn't feel like it was closing in around me. No red scarves hanging on hooks. No lipstick on mugs I didn't drink from. No echoes of someone who once loved me only when it was convenient. I turned off my phone. Not out of spite. Out of survival. I knew she'd call eventually. Not right away. Not that night. She was too proud. Too used to being the one who left, not the one left behind. But once the silence got loud enough, she'd break. And sure enough, the messages started pouring in by noon the next day. The first one was tame. "Marin, hey, can we talk when you have a minute?" I didn't answer. Then came the second. "Marin, I didn't expect you to actually leave. I thought you were just upset." Interesting choice of words. Actually. As if I'd never had it in me. As if I were the kind of man who threatened storms but only ever brought clouds. By the time she sent the third, "Where are you?" I had already changed the password to the Netflix account. It was petty, but I wanted her to sit there, remote in hand, watching that red, incorrect password flash across the screen over and over again. Let her feel locked out for once. The irony? I wasn't even trying to punish her. I just needed space. Real, uninterrupted space. The kind of quiet that lets you finally hear the truth your brain's been whispering through all the noise. She never thought you'd leave because she never saw you as someone with options. And maybe that was my fault too. I let her believe I was immovable. I made it too easy to lean on me without ever asking what it cost. I was the wallpaper in her life. Always there, never changing, barely noticed unless something peeled. But now she was texting again. More urgently this time. Marin, I don't know what you want me to say. You won't even tell me what this is. Are we over? Over? I read that word again and again. Not because it hurt, but because it felt wrong. We weren't over. We were rotted. Over implies an ending. Closure. A mutual pulling back of the curtain to reveal nothing behind it. But this was abandonment in slow motion. She had left emotionally months ago, like a tenant who stops paying rent but still eats all the food in the fridge. So I replied, "Me, you don't get to ask if we're over. You ended us the moment you brought him into the places we built." She didn't respond right away. 10 minutes, then 20, then a full hour. And then came the knock. Not a metaphorical one. A literal knock. On my motel door. I peeked through the crooked blinds, and there she was. Marin, in that ridiculous red scarf again, like it gave her power. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in the way people shrink when they no longer have the upper hand. When the story they wrote for themselves is being rewritten by someone they thought would never hold the pen. I didn't open the door. I watched her raise her hand, hesitate, then let it fall. She stood there for a full minute. Then she turned. Slowly, like someone who'd just realized they weren't the main character anymore. And as she walked back to her car, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because for once, I wasn't the one reaching. I didn't sleep the night she knocked. I lay on that hard motel bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it creak like a metronome, waiting for the footsteps that never came back. For the first time in our marriage, she was the one left outside a door she couldn't open. That image stuck with me, not out of spite, but because it looked like a photograph of what had been happening inside me for years. The next morning, I checked my phone. 27 unread messages. Some long, some just question marks. The tone had shifted from defensive to uncertain to almost pleading. The last one simply read, "I'm scared." That was new. Marin never admitted fear. Not even when she broke a bone skiing and laughed through the ambulance ride. Seeing that single word typed out felt like seeing a crack in a stone wall that had been there since the beginning. I didn't answer. I got dressed, left the motel, and drove to a diner we used to go to before her job swallowed our weekends. I sat in the back booth and ordered pancakes even though I wasn't hungry. It was the only place in town where nobody knew us as Lowell and Marin. I needed a neutral ground to think. I pulled out my journal again. But this time what poured out wasn't grief or rage. It was a blueprint. Not for punishment. For departure. For closure on my terms. While I was sketching out the steps, closing the joint account, moving my few valuables, canceling the utilities in my name, I looked up and saw her through the window. She was standing on the sidewalk, not wearing the red scarf this time. Just a plain gray sweater, her hair unbrushed, eyes red. She wasn't scanning the room like a predator. She was looking for me like a lost child looking for her parent in a crowded store. It shook me, because for a split second, I remembered the woman I married. The one who left notes on my lunch. The one who traced circles on my palm while we watched old movies. She came inside slowly. No dramatic entrance. No scene. She slid into the booth across from me and didn't touch my hands. She just stared at the pancakes, then at me. For the first time in months, she didn't look taller than me. She didn't look like she was standing on a stage. She looked level, human. And she whispered, "I don't know how we got here." I could have unloaded everything. The screenshots, the hotel, the jacket, the messages. I could have spat out the speech I'd been rehearsing in my head since the art fair. But instead, I said nothing. I let the silence stretch between us until it became its own language. Until she started to tremble. Finally she said, "Please say something. Anything. Yell at me. Hate me. Just don't." She broke off, swallowing hard. "Don't look at me like that." I took a deep breath. My voice came out quiet, almost foreign. "This isn't about hating you. It's about remembering myself." Her eyes filled but no tears fell. She nodded slowly, like someone realizing the train they thought they could outrun has already passed. She reached for my hand, stopped halfway, and pulled back. And in that moment I understood. The real power wasn't in exposing her or punishing her or walking out in flames. It was in walking away without turning my pain into her theater. It was in refusing to perform the script she'd been expecting all along. I slid the keys to our house across the table, stood up, and said, "You'll know where to send my mail." Then I walked out. No speech. No backward glance. Behind me, I could hear her whispering my name like a question she couldn't answer. But I kept moving, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders one step at a time. For the first time in years, the air felt wide enough to breathe. The days that followed were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that presses down on you like a weight, but the kind that lets you hear again. Birds, wind through a cracked window, your own heartbeat. I moved into a short-term rental above a bookstore. The floors creaked, the heater hissed, and nothing matched, but I loved it. It wasn't curated. It wasn't filtered through Marin's lens of what looked good on Instagram. It was real. Lived in. Mine. I bought a used desk and started writing again. Not the journal, real writing. Short stories, fragments of thoughts, even a poem about that damn red scarf. It felt ridiculous at first, but every word I put down made me feel a little more like a person again, not just a shadow of someone else's story. Marin texted a few times. They got shorter each week. The last one just said, "I know now what I did, and I know I don't deserve to ask for forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll know I meant it when I said I loved you." I didn't reply, not because I hated her, I didn't, but because I had nothing left to give that version of us. That love had expired. Quietly, long before I left. The only thing left to do was bury it properly and stop visiting its grave. It's strange how healing creeps up on you. One day you realize you haven't checked her social media in weeks. Another, you laugh, really laugh, at something stupid in a grocery store. Then someone compliments you, and instead of brushing it off, you say, "Thank you," and mean it. I still think about her sometimes. Not in anger, just as a chapter. A necessary one. One that taught me how badly I'd let myself disappear trying to keep someone else from walking away. But here's the thing, I didn't disappear. I woke up. A few months later, I met someone new. Not in a movie scene way. No sparks flying across a crowded room. Just a conversation about coffee at a reading event downstairs from my apartment. Her name's Celia. She reads slowly and speaks quickly. She doesn't wear scarves at all. I like that. We're not rushing anything. I'm not building my identity around her. This time, I'm not handing over the pen. I'm writing my own pages first. And when I walk into my apartment now, no one's performing. No one's auditioning to be loved. We just are. That's the strange beauty of it all. Sometimes, the moment you stop begging someone to stay is the moment you finally come home to yourself.